Hey, I'm Dan.
And I'm Mike. Dan, I don't know about you, but when I was a kid, I was taught it's very important to follow the rules. And often rules didn't seem to make sense to me, but I followed them anyways because I was afraid of getting in trouble or what the consequences might be. When you were a kid, did you break any rules?
Oh, yes. And I'm not proud to admit this, but when me and my brother were younger, we really enjoyed video games. So much so that our parents had to limit our screen time to 30 minutes. And they did that with this little dial timer. But every so often, we'd kind of game the system and add a few minutes on there when they weren't looking. So sometimes we'd be playing for like an hour and the timer hadn't rung yet, and they got a little suspicious.
Right, I imagine when you were a kid, you couldn't appreciate why they might be limiting your video game time.
Absolutely, and now I totally understand that healthy boundaries are important. You can't just spend your whole life in front of a screen.
Yeah, that's right. Today's big idea is that Jesus chooses love over rules. I think it's important that we unpack that a bit so we can really understand what it means.
Let's watch this.
Did you know that New York drifts about 1 inch away from London every year? Hi, I'm Alex, and it is so good to be with you. I've always played baseball, and one of my favorite plays was being able to steal second. I loved it. And then one night, one summer, my friend Tom and we literally stole second. We went out to a baseball diamond where the bases were still out at night. It was midnight, and he pretended to pitch, I pretended to hit, and I ran around. I met him at second. I slid into the base. We both called safe. I looked at my friend and I said, run. So we picked up the base and we ran back to my house as quick as we could. I threw the base on the ground and realized, what do I do with it now? And so the next night we went back, went through the whole thing. He pitched, I hit, I ran with the base, and we spiked it back in the ground. We high-fived, and I realized thousands of people have stolen second, but maybe we're some of the few who would choose to return it. You know, I knew better, but I still broke the rules because we wanted to literally steal second or we were bored, I don't know. But sometimes we need to break the rules so that we can love people really well. This is tricky. We're taught to follow the rules because they are often there to keep us safe and healthy, but sometimes we have to break the rules so that we can help someone or best love them. When we read through the stories of Jesus, we see love in everything he does, and we also learn that he knew what was behind all those rules in the Old Testament. Those rules were created to help people love God and love others in the best way possible. And Jesus knew that sticking to the rules exactly as they were wasn't really the point of the rules to begin with. And that leads me to today's big idea. Jesus chooses love over rules. Our current series is called Love. Today's story begins on the Sabbath day. Maybe some of you already know what the Sabbath day is, but just in case you don't, the Sabbath is 1 day a week, we're told in the Old Testament, that people are supposed to rest and not do any work. This was supposed to be a loving rule for God's people, to give them a day that they could worship God and relax from their work. Sometimes a simple rule isn't enough for people, so there were very specific rules about the Sabbath, about what was exactly considered work or not. For example, picking crops on the Sabbath day was considered work. Anyway, you need to know that because the story that we're getting into today was about Jesus and his disciples walking through a field on the Sabbath day. The Pharisees said to Jesus, hey, look, your disciples, they're doing work on the Sabbath day. They shouldn't be doing that. Jesus responded to them, hey, don't you remember what David did? He and his men were hungry, and so he went to the house of God and ate the holy bread. Okay, the point is that would have been against the rules big time because only the priests were allowed to eat it. But David went and got it and gave some to his men to eat it. So then Jesus says to the Pharisees, let's read it. The Sabbath was made to meet the needs of people, and not people to meet the requirements of the Sabbath. So the Son of Man is Lord even over the Sabbath. In other words, the reason the rules are there, the reason there was a rule for the Sabbath day to do no work wasn't just so people would follow the rules, but was so that there would be time to rest and recuperate. And when he says the Son of Man is the Lord of the Sabbath day, well, Jesus sometimes uses Son of Man as a way to refer to himself. And so what he's really saying is Jesus is the Lord of the Sabbath day, or Jesus is in control of the Sabbath day. Another time, Jesus was in the synagogue, the place where the Jewish people worshiped, and it was the Sabbath day again. And a man came in with kind of a weak and twisted hand. And well, you wouldn't have been able to do much work in that day and age with a hand like that. And the Pharisees were also there, and they were watching Jesus very closely to see, is he going to heal someone on the Sabbath? Jesus spoke to the man and said, "Stand up in front of everyone." And then Jesus looked to the Pharisees and asked them a question. What does the law say we should do on the Sabbath day? Should we do good or should we do evil? Should we try to save a life or should we kill a man? But no one answered. Jesus looked at them. He was upset because their hearts were stubborn. Then he looked at the man and he said, "Stretch out your hand." And he did, and his hand was completely healed. Jesus knew that the Sabbath was meant for good, for saving life, for loving people. Jesus knew that the rules were meant to point people to love. Jesus chose love over rules that day. But I've got to tell you, the Pharisees were so mad that Jesus chose to break the rules that they wanted to kill him. Some people got stuck on the rules, and they actually began to love the rules more than they loved people. Now, we can learn from Jesus big time. We need to remember that rules are created to keep us safe, yes, but they also show us how to love people in the very best way. Jesus shows us how to think that through and to know the difference of when to choose love over rules. As we learn from Jesus' life, we discover what loving people in the very best way looks like. And that brings me back to today's big idea. Jesus chooses love over rules. Hey, that's all I've got for you now. Have a great week. We'll see you next time.
So the rules were actually created to keep people safe and to teach them how to love each other better. But people focus so much on keeping the rules themselves that they forgot about the love part.
Yeah, and although the rules are meant to help people live in the best way possible, the way they were being applied ended up weighing people down and almost destroying life.
Let's take a look at the story of Michelle. An emphasis on rules is actually what separated her from God and her church community. Let's see how that played out.
I've been on a journey all my life with my faith, with my friends, and where I've lived. My name is Michelle. I was born in Kenya. I moved to Canada when I was 5 years old, and even in Canada, I moved to so many different places. I studied urban planning at the University of Waterloo, and right now I work as an urban planner. I love creating spaces and places for people to just live and be happy and be safe. Yeah, so every time I moved to a different school or a different neighborhood, I just felt very lost and just like I didn't really belong. I feel like my relationship with God early on in my childhood was very confusing because I would be going to church on Sundays and I'd be around very specific people. But at school, I didn't really have a lot of Christian friends, so I didn't really understand what that meant in terms of the friends that I should be spending time with, and just how God fit into all of that. I felt like I didn't really understand what my relationship with God was like, or what that even meant to have a relationship with God, because I felt like it was really only just Sundays when I would just hear more about Him and hear more stories about Jesus in the Bible, but that was just Sundays. So when I started going to university, I was already at a point in my life where I definitely didn't like going to church. And it wasn't until my third year of university when one of my friends asked me to go to church with them week after week. And finally, after just giving up and saying yes, I went with her, and it was such an incredible experience because it was a very welcoming and open church, and it just made me realize that churches could be a lot more than just very traditional, structured. It could just be more about community. It could be more about bringing people in and loving people and caring for each other. So I think that's when my relationship with God really started up again. Even when I was feeling super lonely and just very displaced, just moving so much, each time God was definitely putting friends in my life to welcome me in and just love me really well. And I think that's what he's gonna continue to do. Right now, I am in an awesome community at my church. I'm surrounded by so many amazing friends that have welcomed me in to their community, and I feel so loved. I always thought that it was all about going to church every Sunday, following the rules, and then you'd end up in heaven. But I'm realizing now that it's more than that. It's about living like Jesus and loving people and always welcoming people in and always making people feel safe. Even though I've made so many different moves in my life and there are probably still more to come, one constant is definitely God. He's been with me through every move, and I know he'll be with me through more moves to come. I feel like even though throughout my life I've moved to different places and different cities, different neighborhoods, and it was really difficult, I feel like now that I have an opportunity to create different neighborhoods and places for people to live in permanently and feel safe in and loved in. It's a privilege, and I just love doing that.
Michelle's initial church experience, unfortunately, isn't so unique. So often people think you go to church on Sunday, you follow the rules, and that's the thing that makes you a Christian. Then they get frustrated with the rules and feeling unfulfilled, and they walk away from church, often walk away from God too.
And I'm so thankful that Michelle had friends who were willing to love her and invite her back to church. She found out that church doesn't have to be just about following the rules, but that when we focus on Jesus, we actually love people better.
Yeah. And that doesn't mean that rules themselves are bad. It just means as we're making choices, we need to focus on loving first and showing the love of Jesus.
And we can do what Michelle does, create spaces and places for people to belong and to feel safe.
Yeah.
Let's break into our small groups and see what this looks like in our own lives.